Hello, this is Taylor, and welcome to the Submissive Men's Mysteries. I'm thrilled to have Mistress Audrey Lu Black here. Please introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and we'll dive into a fun interview.
Hi, Taylor. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Like you said, my name is Mistress Audrey Lu Black. I've been a professional dominatrix off and on for about 26 years now. So I get that fun classification of 25 plus, and then we just ignore whatever the plus means. I specialize in consensual behavioral modification and long term ownership. So while I do a lot of the classic stuff that people attribute to dominatrixes, the flogging, the punishments, the control aspect, all of that leather clad bodice work in person. I also do extensive training with long term clients on servitude, on unpacking toxic behaviors, personally unpleasant behaviors, and learning how to live in your body and your place in the world exactly where you want to be. So,
Mhm.
okay, me on with you.
Well, all of that sounds really important and good. And speaking as someone who works in this space in a men's coach, I can definitely appreciate that unpacking of toxic behaviors and things along those lines, because I think that that is one of the facets and areas that I see a lot of men struggle with.
Sure. It's
So I'm
very true.
curious, like, what your approach is and how you approach relationships in that context in the work that you do. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of what I find myself kind of regularly up against is people who are very interested in the position of serving. I will have to say it's a self-selecting audience. I am a dominatrix. Not every person out there dating is going to be correct in a more subservient role. It's not going to be the place for them. That's okay. Everybody should have options to truly be themselves. But I focus on this demographic because that's what I specialize in. They come to me and largely ask me why their relationships are unsuccessful, why they're unsuccessful in the office sometimes, why they can't seem to get through the wall of dating apps to even start a conversation or get past a first date. And what I tend to find is that men don't know how to date. Men don't know how to be in relationships. And a lot of the advice they're getting is show up prepared to pay, but make sure that you're getting your money's worth. So there's a lot of commodification of dating and then acting like that's supposed to build a healthy relationship. Play these games where you don't text her first because how dare she know your actual feelings? She's going to disregard you. She's not the right person for you. That's okay. The person who is the right person for you is going to be okay with you texting first. The worst piece of advice I think I've seen recently is if you see somebody on a dating app and you can't get through to her on that dating app, you should go to a secondary location like her Instagram or her Facebook and message her there. And I'm going to tell you, like, I may message back to make sure that you're not a crazy stalker, but we have not started off in a place that I'm comfortable. um, so there's a lot of really bad dating app out there, dating advice out there. And almost all of it is designed to make you as generic as possible. To just say this is blanket advice that always works. It's a numbers game. Just keep doing it, keep doing it. And the truth of the matter is, like, even for somebody who, like me, who's very interested in having a service-based relationship, that's not interchangeable. You have to be the right person for me, especially if we're looking for a long term. Um, so that's a lot of what we start with is just, okay, let's put all of the advice from guys to other guys aside and actually talk to the woman, the type of woman that you're interested in and listen to what she has to say. Because not only is that going to help you in those initial stages of starting a conversation, that's what your relationship needs to be going forward. Even if it is a domination submissive like DS relationship like I do, even if it's just your standard relationship, if you're not listening to her, you're listening to outside sources on how to manipulate her, y you're not dating her, they are, and
There's
you've
a
made yourself replaceable. Yeah.
There's something that I would agree with all of that. I think that's excellent advice, and it's something that I find really fascinating in general with, which is that there is this transactive element of like trying to manipulate the woman, and trying to manipulate, the situation, trying to be like three steps ahead or whatever, and it's actually just incredibly unappealing and unsexy because it's like there's no sense of genuine presence in it. It's very artificial.
The problem with playing things like the numbers game is that even if you do get a hit, even if you do connect with somebody in that first interaction, you've wasted all of your energy. You really do have a finite amount of energy. You're a human being. You're only awake so many hours a day. Supposedly you have a job or other friends or other interests. You've wasted all of your energy just scattershotting everywhere. And so you don't have the ability to be present in conversations that might actually be productive, but also you look like that. And when people feel like their interactions in dating apps or online are fake, I do have to ask how much of you is actually showing up. Are you showing up as something that's only partially there or faking or kind of like hedging your bets? Because if you are, then the only conversations you get a generation from are going to be meeting you at that level. They're going to be energy matching. And anybody who's showing up fully is not going to be at all satisfied with the level that you've brought up.
So before we continue on, I just want to note we've had a couple people join us live. Welcome, Sheena. Welcome, Kathara. If either of you have questions at any time, feel free to drop them into the chat and then I will share them. We can both answer them at that point.
Yeah.
So here's a question I'm curious about. In your experience, what does healthy masculinity look like in the context of dating? Like how does a man show up? And maybe he does have some of those toxic patterns, but there's hope for him nonetheless that he can move out of that. What is it that you would look for from somebody when they're going to show up in this context?
Curiosity. Yeah. For me, curiosity is the absolute cure to nihilism. I like to teach there's an old improv trick called yes and, where somebody says something to you and it can be fun, it can be absurd, it can be like, in the context of role play in the bedroom, it'll be, I'm a burglar and somebody goes, "Yes, and I've caught you in my house." Like it's that building of a conversation. It's the acknowledgement of what somebody said, taking it in and playing with it, or at least asking follow-up questions. I'm a person whose personal kink, I think, is learning new things. And so I can't continue in a conversation with somebody who isn't curious. But also, I don't see any value in being in a relationship with somebody who isn't asking me questions about themselves and building on that. Sometimes when men are starting the process of unpacking how they show up persona first in a new conversation and a new date where it's just very front, it's very like, I'm this guy and you take it or leave it. When they're unpacking that incredibly damaging concept, they will revert to the other direction where they are just asking questions, but it feels like a list of questions. I don't feel like you've heard what I've said. I don't feel like there's long term retention or care. There's no building of that conversation. And so it's the start of something, but it's not really the full thing yet.
Yeah, what strikes me about that is it's like there's a lack of attention and awareness.
Mhm.
And I think that plays a really important role in any type of relationship that the person's going to, is that fullness of attention and awareness, that curiosity. Who is this person? And how can I and what can I share of myself? But not like sharing from a place of again trying to manipulate, but more sharing of just like this genuine connection. Here I am. This is who I am, and here you are. How do we mix and match and connect if we do?
Yeah. And it's the start of some interesting things. It's the start of learning how somebody communicates, which is going to be incredibly important in the long run. Are they the type of person who's just going to directly give you information about them? Like, hey, my favorite color is blue, and it's incredibly important to me that you remember that. Or are they going to wait for you to ask questions and then respond to it? Or do they look for you to infer that information from context? You're going through an art gallery and they point out art they like, and it all seems to be impressionist, or it all contains the color blue, and they state things in that moment like, I find this color calming, and in my home I love to have it. Are they expecting you to glean that from the context of conversation? Because as they continue, they're gonna continue to be themselves. They may get new hobbies, they may get new sexual interests, but basic communication tends to stay the same unless you deliberately change it. And so that kind of communication about what's interesting to them, what's distressing to them, what they expect you to do about it is going to pretty much stay in the direct, answer responsive, or intuitive categories.
Mhm.
I like to leave people with very practical things to come away from conversations with me.
That's very clear, and I like that. I think that's really important. I feel the same way, in my own conversations, so I get that. Let's shift this over a little bit toward dominance and submission
Right.
a bit and DS dynamics. What are some of the challenges that men have coming into a DS dynamic where they're choosing to be submissive? I mean, I know I can speak to some of my challenges around that, but I want to hear your thoughts on that and your experiences around
Yeah.
that.
I think that there are no challenges that people have. And I think part of it is to understand that DS dynamics can exist in a multitude of relationships. So there isn't the first thing that we need to make sure that we're not doing is assuming things. And that involves talking about it, communicating what you want, asking the questions as to what happens next week, next month. Are we having this conversation for the purpose of a long-term FLR? Are we having this conversation for the purpose of a one-off scene? Is this a professional relationship? Is this a personal relationship? It's gonna make a big difference. I find that a lot of people who are very interested in femdom or very interested in female-led relationships have more experience learning that information off of what's being sold, which is fun. Some of the porn's great, some of it's awful. Some of the stories are great. Some of the stories are just pure production and never happened in real life. And some of the stories are very centered on a scene. And that's not the same as building a whole life. So the key on this is you have to know what you're asking for. You have to know what you're giving in exchange for it. And you have to be willing to listen to the other side of that. It is a basic negotiation. So things like if you have a list, if you're like, I think that I'm a sub because I have a list of things that I am excited about experiencing or receiving. That kind of list work, that is usually centered around a single seat that usually has very clear guidelines of what you're gonna get out of it. If you're doing that, no problem with that. Go hire a professional. Come to somebody like me. That's where you're asking somebody to take their skill, their artistry, their professional experience, and take care of you while you fulfill a fantasy. That's absolutely fine. That is not the basis of a relationship, though. So if you're showing up in a dominatrix's inbox with your list of things you want, that's not submission. That's purchasing power. And you don't have any.
Mm,
That's the key of it. If you're looking for an actual relationship, if you're looking for a long term FLR, you have to date as well as be kink forward. You have to let them take control. You can tell them fantasies, but if those aren't their interests, maybe you're not a match. And that's the other part of it. I tend to, when I'm instructing and teaching people how to show up correctly and ready for that FLR, 'Cause you have a lot of young men who are very excited for it. They think they're ready for it, but they haven't done that unpacking. We do a lot of the unpacking, but we also do a lot of communication skills. We do a lot of, like, what does an FLR look like to you? Because people do take it for granted. For me personally, I'm very praise forward. I'm very training centric, but my training tends to be scenes, and then I expect follow through throughout the course of the time. I don't tend to punish in moment quite a lot, but I will save it up if it's necessary. I will do corrections. I expect better. I don't use pain as punishment because I'm a sexual sadist. So for me, pain is a gift that I'm giving you, or something that you're taking for me because I need to focus and recenter myself, and I've gotten kind of off the rails. And that's not a punishment behavior because I'm not looking for correction and you haven't done anything wrong. You are taking this because it's a gift I'm giving you. That is not the case for every DS relationship. And if you see pain as a punishment, that will be very emotionally abusive for you because you won't have done anything wrong and you will be, receiving correction in your mind for something you didn't do wrong. And that's not what I'm doing. If you want your pain to be disciplinary only, there are discipline heavy dominatrixes who are into that, or femdoms who are into that. That's the kind of communication you should be talking about. Are you humiliation heavy? The individuals of how that humiliation works, that's her job. That's how she gets to play. And we want her to play. Because if she's really a femdom, she's an artist in what she's doing. This is fun for her. That's where she gets to show up in the relationship.
Yeah, something that really strikes me about that is just the word communicate
Yep.
and just the clarity of communication that's necessary to have this come together, whatever way it's going to come together. And part of that, I think, is just really being in touch with, like, well, what are my desires and truths, and also being able to surrender those
Mhm.
in a very conscious way, a conscious, deliberate choice to surrender those as part of the experience.
Yeah. I think a lot of people know they do have that list of fetishes, right? They're like, I'm really into mummification. And then the question becomes, okay, why? What is mummification doing for you? It is that complete loss of autonomy, the unpersoning of self. You are no longer an independent ego. You want that completely taken away. And so when you're aware of that, when you are aware of what submission actually feels like in the moment, it's no longer a list of like, I want to be saran wrapped. Sure, great. You can also be body bagged. You can also have like full restraint and leather face mask, doing a similar thing with a lot of the body open if it's still triggering the same feeling for you. It allows, like I said, knowing not just what you want, but why you want it, what submission feels like to you, allows her to find all of the ways to get there with you. And also all of the ways that she feels ownership in that. Because if she's just doing it to assure you of your place and she's not receiving that joy and that ownership, it is gonna burn out.
Yeah, at that point, it becomes performative. It's not really present. There's not presence there, and so that takes away from the juice
Yeah.
of the experience.
I get a lot of married men who ask how they can get their wives to be more dominant. I'm like, first off, you can't. You can get yourself to be more submissive. You cannot get her to be more dominant. You can never get anybody to be more anything. That's not your position. That's a violation of consent and manipulation. But on top of it, the last thing on earth you can ever get is for somebody else to be more dominant because you manipulated them into it. That is the antithesis of them having control. So you can ask for things, you can explain what it's doing for you emotionally, and honestly, most people who are fully invested in a relationship with you and feel that you are fully invested back are going to be interested in what that's creating for you. But that second thing's important. A lot of those men who ask that question, their wives do not feel like they are fully invested back. And men have decided that the reason their wives don't think that is because there's these secrets that they can't quite say yet. It's usually because 'cause they're not showing up at any other point in their relationships either. They have not invested the emotional intimacy equity into the overall relationship, and so it is incredibly difficult for the partner they're in to take the vulnerable steps with them in the bedroom.
Well, and I would observe it from this. I mean, basically, what you're describing is nice guy behavior,
Yeah.
where the guy checked out. It's not genuine submission because he's not in touch with himself enough to be able to offer that. If he can't show up fully in the relationship, how could he possibly be submissive to her? Even if he somehow managed to quote unquote get her to dominate him, it would be pure performance because he's not fully there. And of course, she's not going to be fully there. He's checked out. Why should she be checked in?
That it is interesting how many people look at BDSM and think of it as a way to put a spark back into a relationship. And I get the impulse. I get if you already have a healthy sex life and you want to expand that out, look at the things you really love and take those further to the edge, go for it. If you're feeling comfortable in a relationship and you're like, hey, there's some taboo work I kind of want to work on. I want to see what this is doing for me, why I'm holding this taboo or why I'm interested in pushing it. Go for it. That's a healthy space to do. But both of those things require a lot of trust. So you can't backwrite that. You can't replace intimacy with intensity. You can't go into this spark sexual joy BDSM moment, think it's going to work perfectly. And then because it did, it fixes the intimacy problems. Those are two different categories in your relationship. And when somebody has intimacy with you, when they have that trust, when they have that ability to be emotionally vulnerable with you, they will also join you in being sexually vulnerable.
Mm, mm. Just letting that land. I love that. That is so real, so powerful and present.
Yeah. I think that one of the things I apologize, the screen behind my phone keeps turning on and off, which is why you're getting these flashes and backgrounds of lights, and, I should
Well, we could totally play with that and be like, "Hey, that's the divine feminine," or whatever coming through, or that's your dominance coming through.
this is this is straight up when I make a good point, this is the
Yeah,
illuminating spotlight. Like,
there
"Oh,
you
have
go.
have your moment, sit with it." Um, yeah, I think that it it's one of those things that one of the problems that you find in turning DS relationships into long-term situations or just kind of being in healthy DS relationships is that it becomes a crucible of all of the problems of society on the outside. It doesn't fix them. You have to fix those things first so you can make this happen. Because DS relationships are very intimate. They are very negotiated because you can't take things for granted. They are not going to look like you saw on television. They are not going to be what was modeled in church. Your parents, even if they had them, probably didn't model them for you publicly, hopefully not. That's therapy, not kink. But the communication as to what these things mean have to be ongoing. You have to be incredibly comfortable with it, which means you also have to be incredibly comfortable with the conversations about yourself, about the rest of your relationship. And I know I say that as if it looks like, oh, the DS part is part-time. Some people do it that way. Some people do it 24/7. But even when you do a 24/7, you go out with friends that you are not showing up publicly in that way with, right? Hopefully. Everybody has to consent. Um, there's gonna be subtle what we call subtle submissions. A lot of them can look like your old school gentleman behavior, pulling out chairs, making sure my water is constantly filled. We order 2 things that you know I'm gonna like because I'm tasting them off of both of your plates and you're eating whatever the heck I said afterwards. It's that kind of thing that doesn't make anybody else feel uncomfortable. It's also slightly more going to the bathroom and showing me a picture of your cock cage. That's a private moment between us. It's negotiated ahead of time. You can't negotiate those things in front of people in public. So when I say the rest of your relationship has to work, I mean that too. I mean you had these conversations way ahead of time, and you also know how I expect you to interact with waiters. Like, honestly, I shouldn't have to tell you that, but I do need you to know I'm gonna judge you and punish you off of it. If you are disrespectful to my friends, I am not gonna wanna be in a relationship with you, let alone, like, play with you. But some people will think, "Oh, if I brat up in public, then I'm gonna get punished at home." That's not the relationship I wanna be in. That may be somebody's relationship, but it's not mine. So we have to have these conversations ahead of time, because if you do that to me in public, this is probably over.
It also speaks to like a lack of awareness around boundaries and limits and things like that. I mean, as I'm hearing this, what really stands out to me is that ideally somebody has gone and done their inner work, healed their wounds before getting into this type of relationship. And I've certainly both experienced, kinky dynamics as trauma and working through stuff from the past, and also observed it with other people. And then I've also been on the flip side of that where it is a very healthy thing, but it's been because I went and I did my work. And I agree with you at the same time. Like, there is something very important about, like, if I don't have the discipline to have boundaries with myself or boundaries in public,
Yep.
well, how are you possibly going to be able to trust me to have that discipline in private as well?
It is one of those things that I show up as, weirdly enough, an equal partner to my partner. They are
Mhm.
just very different roles based off of what we are comfortable with. But the amount of work I put into the relationship is equal to my partner's, and the amount of validation I want out of the relationship is equal to my partner's. It is just done differently. It looks different and it's communicated different, and the expectations are different, but they're still equal. I find that I will not be comfortable in a relationship in which I feel like I'm doing a lot of the emotional regulation for my partner. If I wanted that, I would have kept dating vanilla. I do expect my partner to do some emotional regulation for me, primarily around the fact that I now teach classes. I now do a lot of public speaking. I, am doing things outside in the world that is breaking my personal comfort zone. And so I'm looking for a partner that is supportive of me and making sure that I'm prepared with the water that I want. They're doing the last minute check to make sure that I'm physically showing up the way I want to show up. That kind of emotional regulation. And sometimes, taking a good beating because I really needed to get that energy out, and they're willing and happy to make those kind of sacrifices for me. They consider it a gift, like I said. That kind of emotional regulation, that's been negotiated. What I won't do personally is deal with a repeated reactivity from a partner or intentional, like, inappropriate behavior from a partner for the purposes of having me correct them. For me personally, I find that manipulative. There are other DOMs that find that enjoyable. They like that steady, constant disciplinary hand. So it is possible. But once again, you have to know yourself enough to know that's what you're looking for. You also, in those moments, can't be looking for them to do actual therapy for you. We talk about sometimes BDSM becomes like trauma work. Yes and no. Like, honestly, BDSM becomes trauma work in the same way any kind of intensive self-care does. There are people who have revelatory experiences from going to a sensory deprivation tank at a spa. There are people who have those experiences being denied. There are people who get, epiphanies after going through extreme physical training. Like, they'll do a volunteer pseudo SEALs kind of training thing. There are some people who have that epiphany after I've been beating them on a St. Andrew's cross. But the work that's being done there, the BDSM isn't therapy, like I said. It's not the same. It's just a start. You have to then go do follow-up with people who are experts in teaching you how to integrate these epiphanies into long-term emotional management, long-term self-care. I often say that epiphanies die in the wind because Thank you to the Joes, to GI Joes. Knowing is half the battle, but it's only half. The rest is hard fucking work, and that's work you have to be willing to do yourself. You can't show up half a person to a relationship, even a DS relationship, and expect that to fill in.
Yeah, there's a quality of netness. I think, being able to meet somebody, and like I can only meet you as much as I'm able to meet myself. Or as I like to say, I can only take care of you as much as I'm able to take care of myself. So if I'm not taking care of myself, how am I possibly going to be able to take care of you, in the context of making sure you have that water or making sure there's other things. I think that that's the area where people kind of get into this notion of, well, if I get into this type of relationship dynamic, it's just going to fix everything. It's going to meet those deep needs, and I'll have all that trauma or whatever unpacked. And it's not as simple as that.
Have you ever, I don't know if this is just my friend group, but ever had a friend who's like, I'm gonna start walking every day, so I'm getting a dog because it'll make me do it. And then you're like, you have a backyard. You're just gonna let the dog out in the backyard. And they're like, no, no, no. I'll get a really high energy dog. And that way I have to walk it. And then you go over to their house maybe 6 months later, and that dog is fat. It is full of anxiety because it's not doing its job. It's completely untrained because it doesn't know its role in the house, because the person didn't do any of the work. They just expected this other living creature to fix that for them, to magically give them the motivation. And you're like, "Okay, you this is not okay. This is a toxic relationship with a pet at this point in time. Like, you need to go fix whatever this is on your own." And I find that I see that a lot of times in relationships, especially if resentment starts to settle in. And this is one of those things that is not just with DS relationships. When you aren't communicating, when you aren't expressing that your needs aren't being met, that your expectations were different, when you aren't fully showing up and listening to the other person, and being aware of what parts of the relationship they have been willing to take control of and which parts they really don't want to, but they're left with, it's easy to show up and end up resentful because what you expected isn't happening. And the downside of that the downside of that is that you end up being an asshole. But the reason that that happens, a lot of that is that we have so much unpacked toxic masculinity. And that's not just with men, that's women as well. We are taught that if somebody loves us, they will know what's best for us. They will always have that in mind and they will get it right. And if they don't get it right, they don't love us. And so you see this happen with, the stereotype of women who are like, "Oh, but if he really cared, he would know I wanted flowers." Like, did you ask for flowers? Did you Is this an ongoing thing you guys have in your relationship? Have you communicated ahead of time? You'll get it with men who will expect a huge amount of emotional labor and be like, "Well, I pay the bills. So obviously she's going to take care of the house. She's going to do all of these things. It's all going to be taken care of for me. And if my life isn't how I expect it to be, even though I paid for it, then I resent her for being the problem." And you're like, the money isn't the same as labor. Anybody can pay for things. If all you are is a paycheck, I can replace you in 10 minutes. If all you are is a cock, I can replace you in less. I have Amazon Prime. It could be now. It's fine. Instagram can get me that. Or not Instagram, sorry, Instacart can get me that. If all you are is semen, I can have kids with anybody else. You have to show up as a whole person. You have to be there, making eye contact as much as possible, engaging with the person in front of you, and truly listening to the goals that they have and appreciating the work they're doing to get there and the problems they're having for both of you getting there, and not assuming that they're just going to take care of everything. And if they didn't take care of everything, it's because they don't love you.
Yeah, I mean, really, what I'm hearing here is this is a term that I use sometimes in the work that I do, and it's covert contract,
Yes.
where it's like, okay, I have this expectation that you're going to do X, Y, and Z, but you don't know that I have it, and I expect you to somehow read my mind and figure it out.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Um,
so
covert contrast is a great term for it. I maybe I'll reference you, but I may be stealing that because honestly, I kinda joke it's the equivalent of, asking for a sandwich when we really wanted a steak dinner.
yeah,
Um, and a lot of people will so it's interesting because a lot of people will put energy in to things that are difficult for them, but not really asked for by their partner. So, like, a good example for this is, like, if somebody, usually a man, comes into a relationship and is like, "But I worked all of these extra hours so we could have these nice things." And you're like, "Did she ask for that? Are the nice things actually for her? Or did you work the hours, expect her to be grateful, and all she saw was your absence?"
right, and that's a perfect example of that. I'll also say if you cite the Cooper contract, Dr. Robert Glover originally came up with it and talked about it in a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy. But
Okay.
it's something that we talk about a lot in men's work community. It's you know part of unpacking toxic masculinity for men is well here's all the ways that you have these expectations that you're not voicing. You're not expressing them cleanly and clearly. If you're not expressing them cleanly and clearly, of course there's going to be resentment there. But a large part of that is going to ask, like, why is that? And what I've found is that when people have covert contracts, it's because they're trying to make themselves feel safe and they're afraid of revealing and opening themselves up and showing the other person, let alone themselves, this is what I really want.
Number 1, I love a good book recommendation, so I insist that you email me that so I can remember it. I'm very excited.
I will.
Um, Number 2, I mean, yeah, the best way I have for most men right now, and it's because it's the context of the information being given them, but the best way I have for men right now to understand when they have expectations, that aren't being negotiated is if you ever find yourself, even internally, saying, "Well, it's just natural," or "Everybody knows," or "It's common sense." Common sense is the shit you forgot learning the hard way. Babies are born stupid. Unless what you're citing as common sense is the ability to grab for titty or cry, you weren't born with this knowledge. You learned it. And now you're assuming that it's not only the same knowledge other people have, but it's based off of the same priorities they have. Nothing is common sense. Everything is scripted by experience and culture. And when we get to it's just natural, especially when we're referring to other people. It's just natural because she's a woman, she would wanna do this. It's just a natural way relationships go. It's just natural. Almost all of the time, what we're doing is assuming other people's actions are going to fit a mold we've seen. And that's not being in a relationship with that person. That's being in a relationship with that mold and wondering why they're not fitting that archetype or that stereotype.
I think there's a lot of truth to that, and I will say like one thing that I do with my partner Tina, we will talk about the natural order of things. But that's something that we've discussed extensively, and we've created an understanding and like a document around and other things, and we continue to talk about because it's
Love
and
documents.
it's something that we're doing to create that very specific sense of a natural order. It's so, in a sense, I guess we could say that it's been a constructed natural order, but it's something that we spoke to because we didn't want to have the covert contract in place on in either direction, and I think that's really important.
I You get a lot of relationships, like DS and FLR relationships, that have, like you said, they have documentation, they have, contracts in the house, and I love personally a physical written contract. I understand that I say that and it feels not sexy to most people. It feels like, this isn't romantic, it's not spontaneous. But one of the things that I find that's incredibly useful on a personal contract is that I work a lot with people who are high anxiety or have PTSD, which means I work a lot with people who have memory issues. And we all do. And for me, a contract is your word, your honor, all of those noble things written in a form that I know without any doubt you understood the terms of, and were willing to put it in paper. There are a lot of people willing to sign your name to it. There are a lot of people who look at DS contracts in the same way they look at marriage certificates, those wedding certificates that publicly avow that you are connected to this human being and this is what you see with them, and that you're willing to really be beautiful and publicly state how much you're devoted to them. Those contracts can really look like that as well. And I think that when you refer to, people wanting to feel safe, wanting to feel secure in their relationship, I don't see anything that does that as well as a contract does, because you really can look at the individual things that are being done for your care and your love and your safety and be like, "This is it. This is the proof that I'm loved today."
Hmm.
It's real rough. We all need that.
Absolutely. I mean, we kind of refer to it in our case as like our truth,
Yeah.
the truth that we've come to. But like, however you refer to it, that is absolutely an essential part of it. So this kind of brings me to a question because we were talking about this a little bit earlier. How does somebody become irreplaceable? I mean, you talked about earlier, like, look, okay, if you got a cock, like that's replaceable. I can just get that on Amazon Prime or whatever.
Yeah.
So how do we move from that objectification toward really becoming, unless of course we want the objectification, but you get what I mean. Like how do we get to that place where we're irreplaceable?
Be more interesting.
Yeah.
This is one of the worst pieces of advice that I see going around for men. It is there is one single way to be a man. It is this, and you must just compete constantly to be at the most of that. And honestly, it's so goddamn boring. It means that you are in competition with every other man all the time. And to be entirely honest, women are weird, or sweet, or wild, or smart, or want to be comforted, or don't want to be touched when they're upset. Women are complicated and ranged, and there are people out there who want you to show up more legitimately you. It doesn't mean to be at them. This is part of where we need to learn boundaries. You can be yourself, be comfortable with yourself, state who you are, show your silly side, and make the fart jokes and realize that you're with somebody who does not necessarily like them. That's not gonna be my sense of humor. And then determine if that's the relationship you wanna be in. You need to show up not just being like, "I play video games," but being like, "I like to play storytelling video games because I'm interested in stories." And there are a variety of ways that you can experience that with another person, both in video games and not. Uh, you need to show up in a way that is more than just a paycheck, and you need to have lived experience with that person. If you want to be irreplaceable, you need to be in your life. You need to be in your home, building that home together. You need to be in the special events in somebody's life. You need to have inside jokes. You need to have ways that you touch them that they find comforting, not just sexual, but comforting, that you know that other people don't know. It is truly just showing up as a full, interesting, vulnerable human being. And that vulnerable part is the hard part.
Yeah. It is. I mean, and at the same time, it's like being bland doesn't really get you anywhere. There's a lot of frustrated people out there who are getting this horrible advice about basically being bland. Like if you check off these little check marks, that person's going to swipe right on you or
Yeah.
whatever. And that, I've never found that to be true. I've never even found the dating apps to work all that well. Quite frankly, all the dating I've ever had to happen, it's happened because we started talking and connecting and there's like, ooh, there's this spark here. There's this interesting connection. Let's dive into that deeper.
Yeah.
And without it, it doesn't really mean anything.
I'm not gonna lie, I have had a lot of success on dating apps. I've also had some really weird experiences. Dating as a professional dominatrix is odd. It has its own minefields. Uh, but I have absolutely found some success on dating apps. It's a lot easier for me. If you go into Field, which is my biggest app that I use, I don't even see you if you don't ping me because I found out a while ago that the most likes you can get on Field before the counter shorts out is 99,000, and after that they don't have another place, so they just put 99 plus. Like that, and I've cleared that thing out before. I can't anymore. It's exhausting. It's a full-time job. That thing is dense. So, yes, you do have to have things if dating apps are gonna work for you that make you stand out, and I would say that that's a really good place to start nicely experimenting with what I'm talking about is showing up. Uh, have actual words on your app,
Yeah.
even if it is just a sex app, especially if you're looking for women. Have actual pictures of yourself. I can understand if you don't wanna show your face, but an actual picture of yourself. If it is just a sunset, I am going to assume that you are not, well, no, actually, honestly, if it's just a sunset, I'm gonna assume that you're cheating on somebody, and I'm not alone in that, I promise. Um, I'm not gonna lie, having an animal in a picture works. I'm a sucker. You get me a dog or a cat in one of those pictures, I'm much more likely to be interested and wanna know what the dog's name is. And make sure that when you're connecting with somebody, you are stating something about them that is respectful and not just physical. The number of pings that I get, given that I have my body and I do show up as myself and I know what I look like, the number of pings that I get that are just, "Hey, nice tits." Because I showed them, they think that that's the start of a conversation. And it's honestly, they're always gonna show up. They're part of the body. So get more interesting than that. And then the other thing I'm gonna give as a piece of dating advice, and I'm gonna give this actually as a piece of sexual advice, but I mean it, apply it dating too, is pick something that you're really good at. Something that you've put the time into and find a way to modify it for the situation you're in. My sexual advice on this is for my video gamers, because I promise you, especially my console gamers, if you can play Mortal Kombat and do the finishing moves, you can rotate that hand and finish her. Guaranteed. You've already put hundreds of hours into memorizing that. Get good. If you are an oboist or a flautist, you've got the tongue work. Apply that. See what happens. So it's easy and funny to give it in a sexual context. But like, if your experience is as a writer, go ahead and write to her. Text her often. Get get that in there. Go with what you've already put the work into instead of putting hundreds of new hours into learning a skill that some guy on the internet told you to.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much truth to that. It's amazing how often, people miss out on that, and yet it's like it's as simple as that. Like, I think that, appreciating the skills that you've already have is so essential, and there's a lot of truth too, I think, to the idea that, if you want to seduce someone, seduce them by.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I can tell you straight up, and I say this is another, D&D gamer, but my D&D gamers are number 1, the best role play partners. Nothing's stupid to them and everything's sexy. And the best texters. They have wonderful texts, they have wonderful sexts. They're pretty good at knowing when they should be using one versus the other. Um, and when they do get a correction, "Hey, I'm not in the mood," they just kinda yes and, they move on with it because like I said, they're really good role players. So, go with that, you know?
Yeah. And yeah, I think, that's really important. So it's simple here, folks. Like, it doesn't have to be that hard. This isn't an elaborate game.
Yeah.
Communicate. Show that you have some interest. Ask questions and be interesting and be interested. Wow, as simple as that,
I mean, oddly as enough, like, read a book together, even if
right?
it's virtual. Like, I have a lot of relationships. My primary relationship right now is not with somebody who's in the same country as us. And so a lot of my relationships are very intellectual based. They're still physical. I'm an incredibly physical woman, but they are very intellectual based. And one of the things that you can do, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a book that's for the purpose of your relationship, but there are some really great ones out there as well. Read a book together and have comments on it. Have things that you actually agree, disagree with, want to hear their opinion about. Do the same when you're watching TV shows together. It's great if you have that TV show that you can't watch the next episode until you're with your other partner, otherwise they're going to kill you. But if you're not using that for actually, like, communicating and experiencing the world and seeing what they love about this world, then that is not quality time. That's just quantity time, which is still better than no time.
You know? Yeah, right now, Sheena and I, we have, because she also lives in another country, so a lot of the time, it's definitely voice notes or Zooms or whatever else. And so right now we're reading, Watership Down together, and that's a perfect example. It's a great story, but it's also a chance for us to talk and connect and dialogue about that. So, it's absolutely true. It's like there's so much more to a relationship than just the physical. So just saying like, "Hi, nice tits," really isn't gonna get you very far.
Yeah, and to be entirely honest, Watership Down, you and Sheena are in an advanced relationship because that is a rough book to read with somebody that you can't be fully crying in front of. Like, that is
Oh, no, now she's gonna be worried because she's like, "Does it have a happy ending?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, it does."
it has an earned ending. How about that?
An earned ending. Yeah, I
It has an
like that.
earned ending. Um Yeah, but it doesn't have to be books if books isn't already what you guys are into, but it does mean that, like, taking in new experiences and communicating how you see those experiences and getting used to talking to each other about emotions when they're not each other's emotions. So, like, going to a museum, I'm a big art nerd, and experiencing paintings and to be able to go, "There was one good painting in this entire thing because everything else felt reductive. But this one painting was doing this thing." Even if that's all you can do, or be like, I feel tense in front of this painting and I don't know why. Let's talk about it. Those kinds of moments where you're feeling emotions about something other than your partner and they are communicating with you about your emotions is a great way to practice hearing them, knowing how they communicate emotions, knowing how you communicate emotions for when it is about each other, for when it is a problem resolution situation. Uh, when we're emotionally tense, it's incredibly difficult to take things on good faith because you're scared, right? Stability is important to all of us. You're not sure what's going to happen at the end of this conversation. And so that defensiveness, that protectiveness will rear up. And if you don't have a practice of really listening to somebody's POV on good faith, you're not going to be able to do it in the high intensity moment.
Absolutely.
But like I said, this is how you become irreplaceable. You become a person that you can have conflict with and have resolution at the end of it. So you are trustworthy at all points in time. You're a person that has independent thoughts that are interesting, perspectives on music, perspectives on cars, if that's what you're into, that now become looped into her head as associated with you.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true, and that creates that experience that's so profound. So, Audrey, where can we find you on the
So the best place to get just my personal interests and thoughts is definitely my Substack. I am constantly posting, and you will also see links on my Substack to my podcast, which comes out twice a month. The next one I have coming out for your audiences will be with Father Nathan Monk, who is a gay rights activist. He's a homeless outreach expert. And we're talking about purity culture. We're talking about his own history with the Pentecostal and I want to say evangelical, but I mean Episcopalian purity culture in the 90s and 2000s. After that, I believe the next one that comes out is with Paul Faust from the Torture Garden. And we're talking about international domination and kind of high experience, high intensity events around the world. So join me with Place Marker for Perversion. And then, yeah, I have Instagram, I have Facebook, but all of that's linked on my Substack, so
Excellent. And for people who are interested, it's going to be below in the show notes that'll be coming out. It'll be coming out in the recorded version of the episode today.
sure.
And then,
Oh, also in person, if you're interested in hearing me talk more, I will be at DomCon New Orleans. Yes, you can correct my pronunciation of New Orleans if you show up. I understand. Um, but that's at the end of October. That's October 23rd through the 26th, I want to say, for the public, in New Orleans. And I will be teaching Beyond Ritual, which is my class on goddess worship in long term ownership and FLR relationships. And I'll be doing a live podcast.
excellent. So, yeah, people go, if you're down there, go check that out or pay attention to the podcast. And finally, what I always like to ask my guests is one final word of phrase of wisdom that we can take with us into the day moving forward.
The best way to be confident is to be correct and correctable.
Love it.
That's my dominatrix variation on Marcus Aurelius for all of our Stoicism nerds.
Well, Audrey, I want to thank you for making time for this interview today. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad that we've had a chance to connect, and I look forward to connecting with you again in the future.
Absolutely. This was a delight. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, everyone, for coming on live. Take care.